It's time for the BOF Breakfast Club, the Business of Fashion's forum for exploring the week's most important fashion news with fashion's most opinionated experts. This week, after a month-long marathon of fashion shows in New York, London, Milan, and Paris, we look back at the fashion season that was, the ups and the downs, the highlights and the lowlights, and the changing role of Fashion Week in the digital age. And last night, the fashion community gathered at the Victoria Albert Museum in London to celebrate the return of Savage Beauty, the stunning tribute to the life and work of Alexander McQueen. A record 70,000 tickets were pre-sold for the exhibition, but what does it say about the state of fashion today? This week, I am joined by fashion historian and BOF columnist Colin McDowell, creative consultant Mima Viglezio, and Susanna Lau, founder of Style Bubble. So good morning, everyone. I wanted to start this week with the fashion season that was. There were over 500 shows across the major fashion capitals this season, so it's all a bit of a blur now, if you ask me. But, Susie, let's start with you. What were your thoughts on the season overall?
Strong season for me overall, especially towards when we got to Milan and Paris. I thought there were some really strong ideas, some very unified ideas. I thought like a lot of designers were chiming in with one another. This idea of eclecticism, a lot, this anything goes approach, a lot of surface detailing, going into the past, Victoriana, Edwardiana. These sort of themes kept on cropping up kind of repeatedly for me. And it made for a sort of really rich season. I don't know how else to describe it other than it was rich.
It's interesting that you bring up Milan because in recent seasons people would not have necessarily pinpointed Milan as one of the strongest weeks. But I think you're not the first person to say to me during this period that actually Milan stood out this week. Or this season rather. What were the shows in particular that you thought made an impact?
Well, I thought because Gucci was on that very first day and it really kicked things off, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a really, really interesting take on the Gucci girl. She suddenly looked a lot more evocative, someone that you'd actually want to be, and I think it really excited a lot of people. I'd never seen so many people so excited in a VC showroom, just like clamoring, like, I want to shoot this, shoot this.
Yeah.
So I think that really kind of kicked things up a notch, and then you get to Prada, you get to Fendi, and again, lots of good ideas.
Okay, Colin, what you've been away from the Milan and Paris fashion circuit for a few seasons, but you returned this season. What were your thoughts on Milan?
Well, I've always liked Milan.
Yeah.
I have to say, I've never subscribed to the idea that it's boring and dull. I think what it does do is produce fabulous clothes. And I think this time, undoubtedly, Miuccia was terrific. And so was the fabulous extravaganza of Dolce & Gabbana, which was barely about clothes, but everything about Italy, because it was very southern. And of course, the heart and soul of Italy is the south. We all know this. The creativity comes from there. And of course, I absolutely loved Donatella. I thought that those big buck sort of girls coming striding down that glass runway, it just lifts your heart, you know? I thought it was very good. I didn't see Gucci, unfortunately. I didn't get there in time for Gucci.
What did you think of the images that you saw?
In what sense?
Of the Gucci show. Have you...
I think it was very, very interesting. I would agree with Susie. I think there's a lot going there, and there needed to be a lot going there. It's been pretty sad for quite a long time now. Really, I'm hoping they've finally come from under this pall of poor old Tom. Tom Ford, he sort of made it so extraordinary that people, I think, have been lost as to where do we go. We don't want people to think we're still doing Tom Ford because things have moved on since Tom's day. So I'm very hopeful. I agree that I think there's a moment perhaps coming for Milan. Whether fashion journalists, who are by and large quite lazy and they fix their minds, whether or not they will actually start looking with innocent eyes and say, yes, this is good, not, oh God, we've got to go to Dolce or whatever it happens to be, remains to be seen.
Yeah. Mima, what about you? You were watching from here in London, the shows, and maybe have a slightly different perspective because you're kind of taking it in through images delivered on the internet or video on the internet.
Well, I do, but I'm getting used to that ever since, I had a time where I was going to all the shows, and now I watch them from home, which is quite comfortable, by the way.
Much less stressful,
The
sure.
thing that I try to do, because I also read most of the most important columns and blogs, and because I need to know what people think, and I try not to be too much influence in what I think. So here's what I think. I was very interested in hearing Susie saying that it was one of the strongest seasons, because all the people my generation thought it was not fashion, it was styling, etc., etc. And I was thinking in the car this morning, actually, it's not fashion that has changed, it's the times, it's society, and young people agrees with it, because this is the era of photograph and being photographed and digital. So back to fashion, I absolutely loved Gucci, because I think what Alessandro Michele did was very honest, and that's what I usually miss. I miss the fact that people do what they are and who they are without thinking, what is such and such going to say? Is it going to be photographed? Will it look good on a picture?
Yeah.
I felt he was honest, and kudos for that, and I really love that. I loved Fendi this season. It was probably my favorite show in Milan. Yeah, probably Fendi. Well, I loved what Miuccia did. I thought it was even better than usual, but that's also on a personal note. I would want to buy the whole collection, but that's very subjective. I was completely bored with Dolce & Gabbana and that Mama Love, whatever, but we discussed that already, and I think, I just move on. And I absolutely loved Versace, which I'm usually not a fan. I thought she did a good thing. She was modern, she was having fun, and it was wearable. It was, commercial in a good way.
What was nice, which I would like to add into the conversation, is it was modern, but she'd gone right back to Gianni
Yeah.
with all of the
But
embroideries
she modernized
and
it
everything.
very much.
It was
It was a lot
which was
of
good.
90s Johnny, and I like it when
Absolutely.
Versace is very strident,
Yes.
and it's unapologetic about
Absolutely.
what it's about.
It's all
I
about
actually, yeah, I
sex.
don't like it when they sort of try and do something, like.
You
a
know
little
why?
bit
Because this time it was
conceptual.
refined.
Yeah.
It was all of the
yes.
above, but with some refinement.
And she looked
that's
terrific
what we
when
know.
she came out
did, yeah.
in a pinstripe suit,
Yeah. Very flair.
So I
Very
think, so it sounds like we all agree that Milan had a particularly strong season. Let's talk a bit about New York, where it all began.
I don't even remember it. So
Okay,
know,
it
was so.
feels like an age
Yeah.
It
ago.
seems so long ago, but let me tell you, it started with
It started with minus 20 temperatures.
very cold temperatures, and of course we had, the Jason Wu show on Friday. We had the
Which I didn't see.
the
Yeah.
Altuzara show on the Saturday, as well as Alexander Wang. We had Proenza Schouler and Rodarte and Marc Jacobs
Victoria Beckham,
and Victoria
who's
Beckham.
doing a great job, I think.
Yeah. What do we think of the role of New York in the Fashion Week system? Because personally, by the time I get to Paris, it always seems to me like New York hasn't really contributed new ideas.
The ideas, the strong ideas of the season aren't set in New York particularly, but I do feel like those brands are doing great things, and great for the markets that they cater to the stores. They're producing a lot of stuff, but I don't know if it's necessarily like the kind of stuff that will shake up a season. Other than I think Proenza was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
For me, like a standout show. Marc Jacobs too, I thought was amazing.
I think it's very local. Those
yes.
clothes don't travel. They're also very expensive when they come to Europe. I think that they're serving the retail market brilliantly in America, and that's what they're about. I don't think you look for ideas, because the retail market doesn't really want exciting and different ideas. They want the same as before, but slightly changed, I would say. And the Americans, I think, have got this down to a fine art. But if we didn't do America, if we didn't go to New York, I don't think it would make much difference at all. America is an entity. It's served by its designers. There are enough stores, enough people to buy the clothes. They don't have to worry about whether they're going to sell in Milan or London. That's my view.
I'm finding there are lots of young designers in New York that are quite interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I go to see some very kind of small presentations.
Like who?
Eckhouse Latte. I think they're a duo that are quite really, really exciting. There's a sort of gothy, punky one called Ammerman Schlossberg.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I try and find the positives in any situation.
I guess the difficult thing in New York, at least what I find difficult, is so much of my time is taken with all of these bigger shows, and it's also busy in New York. That is very
Yes.
hard to find time to go and see the younger designers.
I do schlep around quite a bit in New
Yeah.
York, just sort of
Yeah.
going round and round. But and also, there are just sometimes with the bigger shows, you kind of feel like you know what you're going to get, and you don't feel so guilty.
Can I
about
say
missing
something
it.
about New York?
Yeah.
I thought that the biggest show, probably except Marc Jacobs, are a little bit a copy of what happened in Paris the season
Last
before.
season.
So you find Nicholas and
Yes,
Hedy and a little
And-
bit
and
of
loads of
Phoebe.
Nicola
and Phoebe, and so
yeah.
depending on what brand, and that I think I understand, the business side of New York, and what you just said, Colin, is perfect, but they can't do that. I mean, it's really Hedy, Nicholas, Miuccia, and Phoebe season before.
Yeah.
I
So
wonder
I
how
wouldn't
many-
even get on a
sorry.
plane for that.
I wonder how many American firms, you may know this, Susie, have actually young designers who've been at St. Martin's or the Royal College.
A lot.
Or are they mainly Parsons?
Yeah.
Quite a
That's
lot
a
across
lot.
the
They
Atlantic,
do
do
They got some
they?
good
They do
schools
go
too,
over
no?
there.
I mean,
They have
Yeah.
great schools. It's not for a lack of
Indeed, they
talent
do.
or idea. I
I
don't
think
know.
they have a complex about Europe. I don't know. There's something. I think there's something as if they had to be
that,
to look the
yeah.
same. So I don't know. There's something that they should not look at Europe and just do. I mean, I remember the great times of Ralph Lauren and Calvin Klein, who invented the American chic sport. That's all gone.
Yeah.
It hasn't gone. What has happened is it hasn't changed.
Or it
I mean,
hasn't changed, right.
a Ralph Lauren show is still a joy to anyone who's interested in clothes and beauty
Yeah.
and cut and all the rest of it. But it doesn't change. And why would he change? Why does he need to
If
change?
if it ain't broke.
Exactly.
Let's move on now
Yeah.
to your single most important highlight of the entire fashion season. Who wants to go first?
I want to go first.
All right.
I want to say first the
Single
bad-
highlight.
But can we have a low light?
You can have a low light.
Can I have a low light
You
as
can
well?
have a low light and a highlight.
The big disappointment for me was in London, which I thought was very spirited this time, with Thomas Tate, who I think is a very, very, very good designer. Probably our best designer in this country, in this city at the moment. It had been styled in such a way that we couldn't see the clothes, and that I really wanted to write about him, and I didn't, because I didn't have time to go and look at it, and we couldn't see it. Where I was sitting next to Sophia, near Vitu, we both closed our books. Now that was terrible. I think that was really, really very,
I think a
very
lot of
sad.
people felt that way leaving that show because there's so much interest in what Thomas is doing. But, to create a production format where, people have been schlepping around all day around Fashion Week, and they make the effort to come to your show, and then your clothes are bathed in darkness.
I don't
It makes
know.
it very hard.
I think it's sort of this sort of game that he plays though, and he's played it from the very beginning. Is this hard to get thing? Like, if you want me, come and see me, and come
Oh
and
no,
buy
that
me,
be a-
is
come
can
and
be a
come and
mistake.
seek
No,
me
that
out.
isn't the
It
case.
can be a mistake,
This isn't
can
the
it?
case this time. It was a straightforward mistake.
Oh, you think
he was
so?
I talked to him afterwards.
Yeah. I
spoke
read.
to him.
I thought it was
I
that
mean,
we
it
were
was-
supposed to just see these silhouettes, like kind of, in darkness, and it was very mysterious, and it was very kind of, tension-ridden. I don't know. That's what I.
Well, I
got.
think
I
whether
did
it was
see the
whether it
clothes.
was intentional or not,
It
I
was a
think the
disaster.
result was not a great one for him. I think it was a very anticipated show for him, having coming off the win of the LVMH prize, and
Yes.
hopefully in the next season we'll be able to because if you looked at the collection up close,
Yeah, I went to do a
It was a
VC.
very,
It
very
was-
good
It was
collection.
a very, very good collection.
so sometimes this age, this digital age we live in, being able to
Exactly.
communicate about what you're doing in the instant that things happen is so much more important. People aren't going to give you much because everyone's moving on to the next thing.
That's right.
Okay, Susie, what was your highlight of the season?
My highlight. Oh God.
What
so
show?
difficult.
What show did you leave? I mean, I sit next to you at so many shows, and I know you get quite moved by them. So, you know.
Well, when I was bouncing up and down next to you at Prada.
Yes.
But that's a purely subjective thing because it was such a me
Yeah, same
collection,
here.
as it were.
I wanted it
just
all.
stuff full of things, and that was certainly a highlight. I don't know, I can't name one. Comme des Garçons.
Okay, and
Always-
why?
Just the swell of emotion, and
Yeah.
it was like that last season. Different emotions. This time, you know, instead of anger, it was sadness, and sometimes you just need to feel like this big kind of swell because you don't really get that at other other fashion shows, to be honest.
Anymore.
And to feel that makes you kind of appreciate what it is that you do, and I'm always grateful to Rei Kawakubo for that. But you know, in terms of collections, for me there were many, like
Okay.
in terms of highlights.
Okay. Colin, you were going to say?
I was going to say what is marvellous about the Japanese is they are indifferent to what we feel. And that is fabulous. That gives them a complete freedom.
Meaning?
I don't think they care what people say, you know. Ray's not going to change anything because of what we might
Because
write.
of a press. Yeah.
You know, she's that strong. And I think they're terrific, absolutely terrific. But if I can just say what I thought was this, I think what was special about the three, I didn't go to New York, the three that I saw, they were the whole week was very spirited. There were all sorts of unexpected and interesting things. My favourite, we talked about this yesterday, my favourite was the Chanel show.
Okay.
I mean, they're getting a bit ridiculous now, you know, but they're marvellously ridiculous, you know. For people who don't know about it, it was a full-on, blown up, real brasserie. Very interesting how many people, as you walked in, you saw brasserie.
Gabrielle.
Yeah. How many people said to me,
Who's Gabrielle?
"What is that? What's Gabrielle?" You know,
Really?
people actually think she's
Fashion
called
people.
Coco. But I loved it, and what I loved about it was it had a sort of conversational feel. It reminded me of Impressionist paintings even. You know, girls walking in all sorts of different directions. And actually, I thought the clothes were very good. I don't always think that. I always worry about his couture in particular. I think he loses his way completely, except of course that's what the customers want, I suppose. But did you like that? I loved it.
What I loved about that show, in contrast to the last Ready to Wear, was because, you know, there was such controversy around that whole protest thing, and then here, because the girls lingered on afterwards, you know,
Yeah.
having their coffees, and you could actually go up and look at the clothes and look at the detailing and sort of take in those 97, 94 looks or whatever it is, you know, and really appreciate them. So I think it was a really smart move on their part to sort of stage it like this. I mean, yes, there's still that kind of campiness, the kind of kitsch theme, but I do feel like the clothes were much more of a focal point this time.
All right, Mima, highlight.
Well, I wanted to say Com, but Susie said it, so I will say probably Dries.
Okay.
I thought it was just marvelous. Yeah, there's not much to say. I mean, it's the master.
But
of
was it
color.
different from
He's
what Dries
also
normally does?
honest. Well, I mean, sometimes subjectively I like it less or more. This time
Yeah.
it really took me. I don't have emotions anymore at shows. Like maybe we'll talk about it later. But like I used to have at Lee's show, McQueen's. But after watching the Dries show, I was rather emotional. And also, I must say, this year Givenchy was pretty strong for me.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yes.
probably I would put Dries first, and I didn't like Chanel particularly. But
I
like
just want to.
Givenchy very much.
I need to keep things a bit
Yeah.
focused here. I don't think this fashion season will be complete without talking about the Zoolander moment at Valentino. And you know,
It was a
seem-
marketing
it seems
genius
to
move.
have been a polarizing tactic. So you know, there we are at the end of the Valentino show, as always in the Tuileries, in a dark tent. No fancy production, no brasserie.
just good clothes.
No, a beautiful Valentino collection. But frankly, not a massive shift from what we've seen before, and very much in the spirit of the new DNA that these designers have created. Then out come, at the end of the show, Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson from nowhere to the sound of the Human League. And it was the only moment during the entire Fashion Week season that people leapt to their
Leapt up,
feet
yeah.
and applauded.
Yes.
And I'm just
Because they
wondering,
needed something.
I'm just wondering what it says about the state of fashion today, that
Exactly.
it takes a marketing and PR stunt like that to actually get people excited? Are we all just jaded now?
But you just said it. That's exactly what it takes. I mean, but that's not. I don't think it's because of the designers. I don't think that it's because there's no talent in the world anymore. I think it's because of the era we live in, and so it gets a lot to get you excited, and you need surprise, you need to be entertained, you need to be made laugh or cry or whatever, and that was genius. It was absolutely they're shooting in Rome, they're probably having Valentino Garavani on the set every day. He said, oh, why don't you come and close my kids' show, and that's it, as simple as that. They launched a movie that now everybody wants to see. So yeah, I don't want creativity to be taken over by marketing, but I think the two together, why not? Why not?
I don't think it detracted. A lot of people said it sort of detracted from the Valentino collection, but what they're doing is so strong. Those clothes are so beautiful, like so exquisitely well made. Nothing is going to take that away from them. Not even a Zoolander.
Oh, I don't agree.
If anything,
I don't.
If anything, I think it just sort of made them look a lot more fun actually, and less
like
uptight.
not taking themselves, like taking fashion so seriously.
No,
being
and
able to.
at the after party they were so they were so jovial. It actually, the after party was like a scene that might have been parodied in Zoolander.
Oh really?
Yeah, it was really funny, and Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson were kind of. It felt like they were still in character.
Well, of course,
probably
they're
were.
going to be jovial,
Yeah.
because of course they've had the name check in every newspaper. It was
And the
Valentino.
photo and the
Imagine.
viral video. And
Personally,
Oh, huge,
having
huge.
worked on the designer side many years ago in Italy, in fact, I would feel pretty sore if after 6 months of really hard work, all the tension and the build-up, everyone is going out talking about two not very exciting actors. And I think this then leads us on to the other problem, which is becoming, I think, a real danger, which is this business of everybody wanting to take photographs of people who they think might be famous. I think we saw some incredibly dangerous things in Milan. At one point, they stopped the traffic outside Cavalli. All these not real paparazzi, amateur ones, all taking photographs.
Street style photographers,
yeah,
you mean.
Coming out of the Dior show in Paris was really, quite frankly, terrifying. They were like a tidal wave, running, following other people, didn't know what they were running to. And I think that we have to get our house in order a bit.
Well, certainly, I think one thing that I noticed this season, in addition to the Zoolander moment, if we want to call it that, was the ubiquity of Kim Kardashian and Kanye West. So, in essence, it
enough
feels
with
like
that already. I mean, enough. She's not blonde. She's not brunette. I mean, enough with that. But she's got 25 million followers.
Exactly.
Well, and this is the age, this digital age we live in, when Kim and Kanye show up at a show and they put a couple of pics on Instagram and everyone talks
but at least
about
he's
it.
Kanye
You know,
West.
your favorite show.
With all due respect, at least he's Kanye West. He's done something. He's very smart to
Yeah.
me. I mean, there's...
Yeah.
My favorite show.
Your favorite show was Dries Van Noten, and they held the Dries Van Noten show for Kanye to arrive.
Yeah.
So, even some of the most kind of
revered
designers are also part of this
They
celebrity
shouldn't do that.
system.
But they can't afford to stand away from it. They can't afford
They can't.
not to.
Yeah, they can't say no.
I think it would have been
Why
much more
can't
fun
they?
had
Yes, they
he
Come
come
on.
out. I think it would be much more fun if he'd come out with his hair
Right.
blonde.
Right.
Frankly, that would have been something much more interesting.
Well, let's move on now, because I think
want to talk about McQueen.
yeah, I want to talk about transition to our second topic, and this idea of the lack of creativity on fashion runways this season has been something that over breakfast and in the back of taxis and while waiting for shows. It struck me last night. We walked into the Savage Beauty Gala. I think all of you saw it
Yes.
yesterday as well, either during the press preview or in the evening, or both. And as I was walking through, I was really lucky in the morning, because at the press preview, when Colin and I first got there was almost nobody there.
Yeah, at
And
10
I was
o'clock.
I was
amazing.
standing there in the room with all of these amazing clothes, sometimes completely alone,
Absolutely, yeah.
just looking around and wondering, what's happened to the kind of fashion that people like McQueen and Galliano, and others used
Can I
to
say something
create
here
for us.
before?
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what I said at the beginning. I think it's Lee couldn't be now.
Yes,
I mean,
that's-
it's
I completely
people
agree.
have a different vision. That was for me. It was art. I mean, I was in that show. I was pretty emotional because, as you know, I have some memories with him and some things that were written there. I remember him saying, but I mean, that's something that today wouldn't be relevant. And I'm not taking anything away. I mean,
But
the
one-
last time I cried
yeah.
at a show, it was when Kate Moss appeared in that
Hologram.
yeah. But and now I yawn at shows more than laugh.
But, you know, I'm going to disagree with you there because I don't necessarily think it's not relevant for today. If you look at
It's
the
in a
response,
different way.
you look at the response that the exhibit, Savage Beauty exhibit, had in New York. You look at the customer response to the 70,000 pre-sold
I know,
tickets.
but it's
It
nothing to
is
do with
relevant
commerce.
for today.
It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with business.
You're looking
And that's
at-
what I'm trying to say. Let's separate. I adore that, but I also know the figures of McQueen at that time and today. So the world needs money to sell. People need clothes to put on their backs, and that's art. And
But Nima, would without that period of gestation very early on, where the creative foundation, the creative vision, each of those rooms in that show was, the theme was around a specific element or part of the DNA of the McQueen brand. Without that DNA, could the McQueen business as it exists
Oh,
today?
no.
It couldn't.
But I also
that
think
creative
fashion
foundation
overall,
is important.
I think also fashion overall has something heritage from that. I mean,
Yeah.
the John and the Lees and before them the Eve
Vivienne
and
Westwood.
whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
they made what is it today. However, I think
They are of their time. I've got to
Yeah.
say that's the
Which
the
is
thing. And
5
it's-
years ago,
it's-
10
and
years
not
ago,
to
not
say
far.
that their work doesn't stand up today. Of course it does. Like that's what was so awe-inspiring about the exhibition was that every piece was just so jaw-droppingly beautiful. But if they were operating as they did then today, I don't know if they would stand up. And would we look at it in the same
couldn't
way?
agree more.
Absolutely, we would. I think you're both absolutely wrong. These clothes are timeless clothes. If they were done and we were shown them in Paris last week, we would have gone mad for them. You have to remember, he worked on two levels. None of these clothes were ever sold. They weren't. They were conceived as a spiritual journey, if you like, for him. Now, I had lots of quarrels with him. He didn't like me, and I wasn't always happy with what he did. But when I look at the exhibition, I realise that here is the major figure of the second half.
I couldn't
of the
agree more.
The only people.
But I don't
I
see
don't
that we wouldn't
disagree
be
and
with
he would
those clothes
still
today.
be. No, he would still be a major figure.
I agree with Colin. Susie Menkes last night at the gala
Oh, what
made a
she had to
very
say?
moving
Yeah.
speech.
Oh, did she?
About the state of fashion today, and I emailed Susie last night to get
The words.
the words, and one of the most striking things she said was, "The name Alexander McQueen should be flagged for the inspiration its legacy continues to give fledgling designers. They need to see him as a keeper of the fashion flame, a burning fire of passion in a flat world of normcore
I'm not-
clothes."
Yeah.
Let's look at
I'm
what's
not-
happening to idiosyncratic
Yeah.
designers like Meadham Kirchhoff, for
Yeah.
instance. I think they're a good example of
Yeah.
the system not tolerating basically
There you go.
individual thought. I mean, it's so many voices have sort of come and gone, kind of burn very brightly, and it's a very London cycle of things. So it's not to take away, and even look at Galliano, what he's done at Margiela is sort of tempered himself, obviously because he's at Margiela. And I looked at that showroom and I thought, these are really wearable commercial clothes. They're great clothes. I really like the collection. But again, he's tempering himself to the market.
But I need to say something before calling, because I'm not disagreeing of what you're saying, and I'm not saying, I mean, I was emotional, and I think the world missed McQueen, and Susie said it beautifully. I'm just saying that I'm not saying it's better today, I'm saying the difference is the sign of the times, more than the sign of talent lacking.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, which is very different than saying I prefer now than then.
What
Or
what
that
is the
wouldn't
sign
be-
of the times? What is the sign, in one sentence, what is the sign of the times?
Marketing, business,
It was
sellable
always like
clothes,
that.
people
It's always like that.
much less.
do people appreciate the artistry, like en masse? Yeah,
Well-
a consumer en masse.
I think that we go back to the silly nonsense at Valentino. People are seeing fashion as something which is not necessarily about clothes at all, you know. And I
There you
have to
go.
say that one of the problems, not you are an honourable exception. I think bloggers and all these people who know absolutely nothing, they have a huge influence on other people who know absolutely nothing. And I think there should be some sort of bloggers' charter where they have to have an exam.
Oh my God.
Where they have to have an exam to prove they know something. Because no, journalists do know things because they've been to university and all the rest.
This
right?
goes
Like
against
you've been doing.
internet,
Not all of
like
them.
just
No,
the
in some
internet.
countries
I
they
know,
don't.
but I want to go against it. I want to go
Let's
against
save
it.
that for a future
Another one.
edition of the
Another
Breakfast
one.
Club.
Colin
The-
basically just wants to change the fundamentals of the internet.
The bloggers
More or
charter.
less,
I'll make sure to bring the both of you back to discuss the
I'd love
elements
that,
of the bloggers charter. Thank you, Mima, Susie, and Colin. That's all the time we have for this week's Breakfast Club on the business of fashion. The forum for exploring the most important fashion news with fashion's most opinionated experts. I hope you'll join us in future weeks for another session of the Breakfast Club. And please don't forget to subscribe to the Business of Fashion on YouTube. See you soon.